Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the dust motes and sun-drenched fields of ancient Egypt to explore a really, truly bizarre aspect of their daily grind, the humble, yet mighty, onion. Imagine yourself, if you will, standing on the banks of the Nile, the warm breeze ruffling your linen tunic. The air is thick with the scent of fertile earth, a hint of papyrus, and perhaps, just perhaps, the pungent aroma of, well, onions. You see fields stretching out, not just of wheat and barley, but vast swathes of green shoots, promising those crisp, tear-inducing bulbs. You might think, an onion? Really? But in ancient Kemet, this unassuming vegetable held a power you wouldn't believe. It was sustenance, medicine, a spiritual offering, and yes, even a form of payment. You're about to discover a world where this everyday root vegetable was a cornerstone of an entire civilization's economy. You probably wouldn't survive a single tax season without weeping. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, maybe let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture the scene. You're trudging through the rich, dark soil, the kind that sticks to your sandals in satisfying clumps. This is the Black Land, Kemet, a gift from the annual inundation of the Nile. It's lush, it's fertile, and it's absolutely teeming with life. And among the most prolific growers here, alongside your emmer wheat and your barley, were the onions. Not just any onions, mind you, but varieties that have been cultivated for millennia, some perhaps even tasting a little sweeter or more piquant than what you'd chop for your dinner tonight. These weren't merely side dishes, they were dietary staples, especially for the working classes. You'd find them boiled, roasted, maybe even eaten raw if you were truly brave or desperately hungry after a long day of, well, doing whatever hard labor ancient Egyptians did. Think of them as the original energy bar, but with more layers and a slightly higher chance of giving you bad breath. One mainstream historical fact we know is that the diet of the common Egyptian was largely vegetarian, focused on bread, beer, and a variety of vegetables and fruits. Meat was a luxury, reserved for special occasions or the wealthy elite. This meant vegetables like onions, garlic, and leeks weren't just common. They were essential for survival, providing crucial vitamins and minerals. Imagine trying to build a pyramid on a diet of pure steak. Sounds appealing, but probably not sustainable or affordable for the average builder. The humble onion, however, was plentiful, easy to grow, and packed a punch. Now for a quirky tidbit. Did you know that onions were sometimes given as offerings to the gods? It sounds odd to us, used to incense and elaborate rituals, but onions held a symbolic purity for the Egyptians. Their layered structure might have even represented the layers of existence or the cyclical nature of life and death. So next time you're peeling an onion and tearing up, remember, you're practically participating in an ancient sacred rite. Just, without the chanting and the pyramids. Historians still argue whether the tears were part of the intended spiritual experience or merely an occupational hazard. The prevalence of onions meant they were everywhere, in the fields, in the markets, in the kitchen, and eventually, as we'll see, even in the royal coffers. Their simple abundance made them a natural candidate for a form of payment or, more often, a ration. You might not have seen a gold coin in your lifetime, but you definitely know the weight of a basket of freshly harvested onions. It wasn't just about what you ate, it was about what you produced and what the pharaoh expected in return. The very earth you worked provided the means of your civic duty, one pungent bulb at a time. The Nile's gift wasn't just life-giving water, it was life-sustaining produce, ready to be counted, collected, and cataloged. As you continue your imaginary stroll along the Nile, you can practically feel the rhythm of the seasons dictate every aspect of life. The very breath of Egypt was tied to the annual flooding, the Ake, when the Nile overflowed its banks, depositing that incredibly rich, black silt onto the floodplains. This wasn't just a natural phenomenon. It was a divine blessing, an agricultural alarm clock that reset the year. After the waters receded, leaving behind that fertile mud, came the parade, the season of growing. This is when you, the ancient Egyptian farmer, would be out there, tirelessly tilling, sowing, and tending your crops. And among those precious crops, nestled in neat rows, were the onions. They thrived in this rich, well-drained soil, drawing nutrients from the very essence of the river. The sheer agricultural bounty of the Nile Valley was truly astounding, especially when you consider the vast stretches of barren desert surrounding it. It created an oasis, a ribbon of life that supported one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known. Think of it like this. If you had a garden today, and every year it magically refreshed itself with super nutritious soil, you'd be pretty thrilled, right? That was the reality for the Egyptians, year after year. This predictable cycle meant that, for the most part, food security was a given, which allowed for the development of complex social structures, monumental architecture, and, of course, intricate systems of taxation. You couldn't build pyramids on an empty stomach or with a starving workforce. One mainstream historical fact is that the Egyptian economy was primarily agricultural, with the vast majority of the population involved in farming or directly related activities. This agrarian base was the engine of their society, generating the surplus wealth that fueled everything from royal projects to religious ceremonies. Without the tireless efforts of the farmers and the predictable cycles of the Nile, the pharaohs wouldn't have had the resources or the labor force to achieve their legendary feats. It's a reminder that even the grandest empires are built on the foundations of basic sustenance. Now, a quirky tidbit. The Egyptians were so adept at managing water that they developed sophisticated irrigation techniques to extend the reach of the Nile's floodwaters. Imagine a network of canals and dikes, meticulously maintained, ensuring that even fields slightly further from the main river received their life-giving soak. It wasn't just passive reliance, it was active engineering. You might have found yourself wading through calf-deep water, opening and closing sluice gates, all to ensure your onion patch got its fair share. It truly was a community effort, or perhaps a centrally organized effort depending on how much direct oversight the local nomarch had. Historians still argue whether the invention of the shaduf, a simple but effective water lifting device, was a homegrown innovation or influenced by neighboring cultures. Either way, it certainly made those irrigation tasks a little less backbreaking. The final season, Shimu, was the time of harvest. This is when the fruits of your labor, literally, were gathered. The fields, once green and vibrant, would transform into scenes of bustling activity. Workers would be stooping, cutting, gathering, and bundling. And yes, among the golden stalks of wheat and barley, there would be the satisfying rustle of onion tops, pulled from the earth, their bulbs gleaming. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of a year's work, and the moment when the pharaoh's representatives would begin their assessments. Your harvest wasn't just for your family. A significant portion was earmarked for the state. It was a tangible connection between your sweat and the grandeur of the temples and tombs rising along the Nile. Every bulb you pulled from the ground had a destiny, whether it was on your dinner plate, in an offering, or contributing to the vast imperial larder. With the harvest gathered, the air, usually thick with the scent of freshly cut stalks, now carries an underlying hum of administrative activity. For you, the ancient Egyptian farmer, the next crucial phase wasn't just about storing your personal share. It was about meeting the pharaoh's demands. And the pharaoh, being the living embodiment of the gods and the ultimate owner of all land, had considerable demands. Taxation in ancient Egypt wasn't like swiping your credit card or filling out a complicated tax form. It was a physical transfer of goods, a direct contribution from your toil to the state's coffers. And these coffers weren't just for gold or precious stones. They were for everything that sustained the empire, including, you guessed it, onions. You see, the concept of money as we understand it, with standardized coinage, was largely absent for most of ancient Egyptian history. Instead, the economy operated on a system of barter and redistribution. This meant that if you needed something, you either traded for it directly or you received it as a ration from the state. And to facilitate this system, the state needed to collect a vast array of goods. Think of it: grain to feed the populace and the workers, linen for clothing and sails, livestock for meat and labor, and yes, bushels and bushels of pungent, tear-inducing onions. It was a complex logistical ballet, choreographed by scribes and overseen by officials, all to ensure the smooth functioning of the pharaoh's grand projects and the welfare of the kingdom. One mainstream historical fact is that the primary form of taxation in ancient Egypt was in kind, meaning goods rather than currency. This system was incredibly efficient for an agricultural society, directly converting the surplus produce of the land into the resources needed to run the state. It ensured that even those without access to precious metals could contribute directly to the pharaoh's wealth and power. Imagine trying to explain cryptocurrency to an ancient Egyptian tax collector. They'd probably just stare blankly and ask for more barley. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, specialized taxes were levied based on specific crafts or resources. If you were a fisherman, you might pay in fish. If you were a potter, perhaps in pots. It was a remarkably pragmatic approach, ensuring that whatever you produced, a portion of it was expected as your civic duty. So, for the humble onion farmer, their tax burden would naturally fall, at least in part, on their prized produce. It made perfect sense in a system without a universal medium of exchange. Historians still argue whether the fairness of these assessments varied significantly from region to region, or if there was a standardized national rate based on land productivity. The process often involved officials arriving at your fields or granaries, meticulously assessing your harvest. They weren't just guessing. Scribes would be there, tallying everything on papyrus rolls with reed pens. You'd watch as your hard-earned onions were weighed, measured, and then loaded onto boats or donkey carts, destined for state storerooms or directly to construction sites. It must have been a moment of mixed feelings, pride in your abundant harvest, mixed with the slight sting of seeing a good portion of it disappear into the bureaucratic maw. But there was also a sense of security. By contributing to the pharaoh's wealth, you were contributing to the stability of the kingdom, which in turn protected your own way of life. It was a grand cycle of production, taxation, and redistribution, all designed to keep the wheels of the empire turning, powered by the very soil beneath your feet and the humble onions within it. So, you've witnessed your harvest being assessed, and now the question lingers. How exactly did these particular pungent bulbs function as a form of payment? It's not like you could walk into a market and simply exchange 3 onions for a new pair of sandals, or hand over a basket of them to buy a papyrus scroll. The system was a bit more nuanced than that. While direct bartering of onions for everyday goods might have happened locally between neighbors, the state's use of them as a form of tax was primarily about collection and redistribution. Think of it less as currency in the modern sense, and more as a contributory resource. Your onions, along with everyone else's wheat, barley, and linen, flowed into central state granaries and storerooms. From there, they could be allocated for various purposes. For instance, the very workers building those magnificent temples and tombs, yes, even the pyramid builders, weren't paid in gold or silver. They received rations. These rations consisted of staples, bread, beer, and, you guessed it, a healthy supply of onions and other vegetables. So, in a roundabout way, your tax payment of onions was directly feeding the workforce that built the marvels of Egypt. It was a closed loop, an ancient form of socialist economy, if you will, where the state collected the produce and then distributed it back to those who served the state. One mainstream historical fact is that wage payment in ancient Egypt was predominantly in kind, especially for laborers on state projects. This system was vital for large-scale undertakings that required thousands of workers. Imagine the logistical nightmare of minting enough coins to pay everyone, even if they had coins, which for much of Egyptian history they didn't. Paying in readily available, locally produced goods like onions made perfect practical sense. It ensured workers were fed and kept the agricultural economy flowing. Now for a quirky tidbit. While onions were common, they weren't necessarily considered the most prestigious form of payment. Grain, particularly barley and emmer wheat, was often seen as the baseline salary, and everything else might have been considered a supplement or a special ration. So, if you were a particularly skilled craftsman, you might get a bit more beer, or perhaps some extra fish, but the core of your payment would still be that reliable grain. The onion's role was more as a ubiquitous, healthful addition to that fundamental diet. Historians still argue whether the exact caloric value of these rations was precisely standardized across different workforces or if there was some variation based on the intensity of the labor. The practicality of using onions for this system was clear. They were abundant, relatively easy to store, though they do have a shelf life, unlike gold, and provided essential nutrition. They were part of the logistical backbone of the empire. You might not have been exchanging your onions for trinkets, but your onions were directly contributing to the state's ability to feed its armies, supply its temples, and sustain its massive construction projects. Every single bulb, pulled from the fertile soil, played a small but significant part in keeping the entire magnificent machine of ancient Egypt humming. It's a humbling thought, isn't it? How something so ordinary could be so utterly indispensable to such an extraordinary civilization. Your tears while peeling them might even be a tribute to their profound historical significance. Beyond their undeniable role in the ancient Egyptian diet and economy, onions held a significance that went far beyond mere sustenance. For the Egyptians, life was steeped in ritual, symbolism, and a deep connection to the divine. And in this rich tapestry of belief, the humble onion found its place, weaving itself into practices of medicine, religious ceremony, and even the solemn rites of mummification. It wasn't just a vegetable, it was an entity imbued with special properties. Imagine being sick in ancient Egypt. Your doctor, who might also be a priest, wouldn't just prescribe a simple remedy. They'd turn to a pharmacopoeia derived from centuries of observation, and prominently featured within it would be the onion. The Egyptians believed onions possessed powerful antiseptic and curative properties. You might have been given a poultice of crushed onions for an aching tooth, or perhaps an onion concoction to ward off a cold. They were thought to alleviate headaches, treat snake bites, and even act as a diuretic. It's almost like they believed an onion a day kept the ancient Egyptian doctor away. One mainstream historical fact is that ancient Egyptian medical texts, such as the Ebers Papyrus, frequently list onions as ingredients in various remedies. These papyri demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of botanical properties, even if their understanding of disease mechanisms differed from ours. This wasn't folk magic. It was an early form of evidence-based medicine, built on generations of trial and error. The onion's prominent inclusion in these texts speaks volumes about its perceived efficacy. Now for a quirky tidbit, the onion's use wasn't limited to the living. It found its way into the sacred process of mummification itself. Some accounts suggest that onions were placed in the eye sockets of mummies, and even around other body cavities, perhaps to mask odors, or more likely, for their symbolic significance related to purity and the afterlife. The concentric layers of the onion were sometimes seen as representing eternal life and the cyclical nature of existence, making it a fitting inclusion in the journey to the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. Imagine being a priest, carefully placing a small, dried onion where eyes once were, knowing its spiritual weight. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose was practical preservation or purely symbolic, though it was likely a blend of both. And then there's the religious aspect. Onions were offered to various gods, particularly those associated with healing and the underworld. They were considered pure enough to be presented in temples. You might have seen priests carrying baskets of onions to lay before statues of deities, the pungent aroma mingling with the sweet scent of incense. This reverence highlights a key difference between our modern view of such a common food and the profound respect it commanded in antiquity. It wasn't just food, it was part of the cosmic order. So, the next time you're dicing an onion for your dinner, pause for a moment. Consider its journey through time, from a simple vegetable to a multifaceted symbol. From soothing ailments to guiding the dead to the afterlife, the onion truly had a starring role in the rich, complex drama of ancient Egyptian life. It transcended its culinary purpose to become an integral part of their spiritual and medical landscape, a silent, layered witness to millennia of history. Now, let's shift our focus from the symbolic to the incredibly practical. Imagine being a worker, perhaps one of the thousands toiling under the relentless Egyptian sun, shaping limestone blocks for a pharaoh's tomb or hauling massive timbers for a temple. You're not being paid in shining gold pieces. Your wages come in the form of daily sustenance. And among those crucial provisions, ensuring you have the energy to lift, pull, and carve, are those familiar, humble onions. The system of ration payments was the bedrock of Egypt's monumental achievements, directly linking agricultural output to human labor. For the vast majority of laborers, especially those on state-sponsored projects, their compensation wasn't a numerical figure in a ledger to be exchanged for goods at will. Instead, it was a daily or weekly distribution of essential foodstuffs, a certain quantity of bread, a measure of beer, which was a staple, more like a nutritious gruel than a party drink, and a portion of vegetables, including generous amounts of onions and garlic. Think of it as the ancient world's most robust meal plan, designed to keep a massive workforce fed, healthy, and productive. You might find yourself lining up with dozens of others, waiting patiently as scribes and overseers meticulously dole out your allotted share. One mainstream historical fact is that the standard daily ration for a laborer could include several loaves of bread and 2 jars of beer, with additional vegetables like onions and legumes. This wasn't luxury dining, but it was enough to provide the necessary calories and basic nutrition for demanding physical work. The consistency of these rations was a testament to the organizational prowess of the Egyptian state, ensuring that even in a society without modern currency, its workforce was sustained. Now for a quirky tidbit. The quality and quantity of rations could sometimes vary depending on the status or skill level of the worker. A foreman or a highly skilled craftsman might receive slightly better or larger rations than a common laborer. It wasn't about getting richer, but about acknowledging expertise and ensuring that those with greater responsibilities were adequately fueled. Imagine the quiet envy you might feel watching the master stonemason receive an extra bulb or two, all while you're thinking, I really moved that rock by myself, didn't I? Historians still argue whether these variations in rations were strictly based on merit or sometimes influenced by patronage and social connections. The act of receiving your onions wasn't just about food, it was about your livelihood, your place in society. It underscored the direct relationship between your labor and the state's provision. You weren't earning money to buy food, you were earning food by providing labor. And the onion, so often taken for granted in modern kitchens, was a vital component of this ancient payroll. It provided not just flavor, but crucial vitamins, helping to prevent scurvy and other deficiency diseases that could cripple a workforce. So, as you bit into that crisp, slightly sweet onion after a long day of quarrying stone, you weren't just eating, you were consuming your wages, the very essence of your economic existence in ancient Egypt. It's a system that truly built an empire, one onion at a time. With all these onions and countless other agricultural products flowing into the state's hands, the ancient Egyptians faced a monumental challenge: storage. You couldn't just pile thousands of tons of grain and vegetables in an open field and hope for the best. This is where the truly impressive ingenuity of the Egyptian state came into play with their granaries and storehouses. These weren't just glorified sheds. They were sophisticated architectural marvels, designed to preserve the nation's wealth and ensure a consistent supply of food, year-round, even through lean times or unexpected droughts. Imagine yourself as an overseer, standing amidst a vast complex of these granaries. They might be cylindrical structures with domed roofs, often made of mud brick, carefully plastered to keep out pests and moisture. Or perhaps you'd see rectangular buildings with elevated floors to protect against dampness. The air inside would be cool and dry, permeated with the mingled scents of stored grains, dried vegetables, and, yes, the unmistakable tang of countless onions, carefully piled or suspended to allow for air circulation. This was the beating heart of the Egyptian economy, the literal pantry of the pharaoh. One mainstream historical fact is that granaries were among the most crucial state buildings in ancient Egypt, second only perhaps to temples and palaces in their importance. Archaeological excavations have unearthed the remains of massive granary complexes, some capable of holding thousands of tons of grain. These structures were vital for managing the feast or famine cycles inherent to an agricultural society, allowing the state to stockpile food during abundant harvests and redistribute it during scarcity. It was a sophisticated system of national food security, without which the empire simply could not have sustained itself. Now for a quirky tidbit. The scribes weren't just meticulous about how much was put in, they were also diligent about when it was put in. Sometimes, batches of grain or vegetables were marked with the year of harvest, almost like an ancient best-by date, to ensure that older stock was used first. Imagine the pressure of being the official responsible for ensuring no precious onions spoiled. It's a testament to their organizational skills that they managed such vast quantities of perishable goods without widespread spoilage. Historians still argue whether specific storage techniques for onions, beyond general dry, cool conditions, were developed to maximize their shelf life compared to other produce. The process of distribution from these royal storehouses was equally meticulous. When workers needed their rations, or when food aid was required for a particular region, precise quantities would be measured out. Scribes would record every single transaction, ensuring that every grain, every loaf, and every onion was accounted for. This wasn't just about feeding the people, it was about control, about power, and about maintaining the intricate social hierarchy. The pharaoh, through his officials, literally held the power to feed his people, a tangible demonstration of his divine mandate. You might watch as your own portion of onions is measured out from a vast, dark chamber, a direct link from the royal storehouse to your daily meal. Behind every meticulously stacked pile of onions, every well-stocked granary, and every precise ration distribution stood a figure of immense importance in ancient Egypt, the scribe. These weren't just people who could write. They were the backbone of the entire administration, the human memory banks, and the meticulous accountants of an empire that ran on goods, not gold. Their work was the unseen scaffolding that held up the magnificent facade of pharaonic power, ensuring that everything, from the smallest onion tax to the largest pyramid project, was recorded. Imagine yourself in a dimly lit chamber, perhaps within a temple complex or a royal administrative building. The air is thick with the scent of papyrus, ink, and a faint, sweet aroma of something like resin. You see a scribe, cross-legged, perhaps on a mat, with a roll of papyrus unfurled before them. Their tools are simple: a wooden palette holding cakes of red and black ink, a small water pot, and a collection of reed pens. Their focus is absolute, their hand moving with practiced grace as they inscribe hieroglyphs or hieratic script onto the delicate surface. Every bushel of grain, every head of cattle, and yes, every single basket of onions collected as tax or distributed as rations found its way onto their records. One mainstream historical fact is that scribes held a privileged and respected position in ancient Egyptian society. They were educated, often from a young age, in specialized schools, mastering a complex writing system that few others understood. Their literacy was the key to power, allowing them to manage the state's resources, administer justice, and preserve religious knowledge. You might even hear the quiet scratching of their pens as they document your family's annual onion harvest, linking your humble toil directly to the vast bureaucratic machine. Now for a quirky tidbit. Scribes often practiced their writing on ostraca, which were broken pieces of pottery or limestone flakes, before committing things to precious papyrus. Imagine a scribe in training repeatedly sketching the symbol for onion on a pottery shard, getting every curve and stroke just right. It was essentially their ancient scratchpad or whiteboard. Sometimes, these practice pieces would even include little doodles or humorous remarks, giving us a rare glimpse into the more informal side of these meticulous record keepers. Historians still argue whether the most advanced scribes were considered intellectuals and scholars in their own right, or primarily functional administrators whose role was solely to record. Their records weren't just for taxation. They documented land ownership, legal proceedings, temple inventories, and the movement of goods across the entire kingdom. If there was a debate about how many bushels of onions your neighbor owed, the scribe's ledger was the ultimate authority. They were the human databases, ensuring accountability and preventing widespread fraud in a pre-digital age. So, as you see the scribe diligently working, remember that every stroke of their reed pen was helping to maintain the delicate balance of one of history's greatest empires, ensuring that the pharaoh's will and the flow of vital resources like your onions was accurately and permanently recorded. It truly was the ultimate paper trail, powered by ink and reeds. Even in a meticulously organized society like ancient Egypt, with its diligent scribes and vast granaries, human nature found ways to, shall we say, optimize the system. That's right. Even when it came to something as seemingly mundane as onion taxes, there were attempts to skirt the rules, fudge the numbers, and perhaps, just perhaps, keep a few extra bulbs for oneself. After all, the ingenuity required to build pyramids could also be applied to avoiding contributions to them. Imagine you're a farmer, and the tax assessor is due to arrive. Your fields are abundant. Your onion yield is robust. But do you declare every single one? Perhaps a small, strategically placed pile of less than perfect bulbs goes unnoticed, or a few baskets are accidentally left off the ledger. This wasn't about widespread rebellion. It was about individual survival and the universal human desire to keep more of one's hard-earned produce. It's like today's mild grumbling about tax season, but with more dirt under your fingernails and actual onions. One mainstream historical fact is that tax evasion and corruption, though frowned upon and punishable, were documented issues in ancient Egypt. Papyrus records contain complaints about dishonest officials, underdeclared harvests, and attempts to bribe assessors. While the state strived for perfect order, the reality on the ground was often messy, reflecting the perpetual tension between central authority and individual self-interest. It seems some things never change, even across millennia. Now for a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, the evasion wasn't just about hiding produce. It could be about exaggerating hardship. A farmer might claim their land was less fertile than it actually was, or that their harvest was damaged by pests or floodwaters, hoping for a reduced assessment. Imagine convincing a skeptical scribe that a phantom locust swarm devoured precisely half your onion crop. These little white lies, or perhaps off-white, lies given the color of most onions, would have been part of the daily dance between the taxpayer and the tax collector. Historians still argue about the true prevalence of such low-level tax avoidance, as records typically only show the successful prosecutions, not the countless small, undetected attempts. The pharaoh's administration had measures in place to combat such attempts. Overseers would periodically inspect fields, comparing current yields to past records. Scribes cross-referenced reports from different officials. Punishment for significant fraud could be severe, ranging from beatings to forced labor, serving as a deterrent. However, for the small-scale farmer trying to hold on to a few extra onions, the risk might have seemed worth it. It's a subtle reminder that even in an age of divine kings and absolute power, the human spirit for a little bit of cheeky rebellion, or at least self-preservation, always found a way. So, next time you're peeling an onion, consider the ancient Egyptian farmer, perhaps wiping away not just tears from the fumes, but also a bead of sweat from a narrow escape with the taxman. The journey of the onion through ancient Egypt isn't just inferred from dusty papyrus scrolls. It's physically etched into the archaeological record. From ancient tombs to preserved food offerings, the humble onion has left its unmistakable imprint, allowing modern historians and archaeologists to piece together its profound significance. These aren't just theories. They are tangible connections to a past where this bulb was revered. Imagine being an archaeologist, carefully sifting through the sands of time at a dig site. Suddenly, you uncover something unmistakably familiar, the dried, papery remnants of an onion. It might be in a storage jar, part of a funerary offering intended to nourish the deceased in the afterlife, or even nestled within the wrappings of a mummy. These aren't pristine specimens, of course, but their distinct shape and layered structure are unmistakable, whispering tales from millennia ago. One mainstream historical fact is that actual remains of onions have been found in numerous ancient Egyptian tombs and archaeological sites, dating back to the earliest dynasties. Their presence alongside other foodstuffs in burial contexts underscores their importance as a dietary staple and a significant offering for the deceased. These finds provide direct, irrefutable evidence of the onion's widespread use and cultural value, not just literary mentions. Now for a quirky tidbit. The detailed depiction of onions in tomb paintings and temple reliefs also provides invaluable insight. You can see scenes of daily life, including agricultural activities, where workers are clearly cultivating and harvesting onions. Imagine an ancient artist meticulously painting rows of green shoots and rounded bulbs, perhaps even capturing the distinct purple hue of a particular varietal. These artistic representations serve as a visual testament to the onion's omnipresence in the Egyptian landscape and diet. Historians still argue whether some of these depictions were idealized representations of abundance or truly accurate snapshots of typical harvests. Beyond the physical remnants and artistic depictions, the very seeds of ancient onion varieties have sometimes been recovered, allowing botanists to study the specific types cultivated by the Egyptians. Imagine the scientific thrill of analyzing a seed that hasn't seen the light of day for thousands of years, capable of telling us about the genetic lineage of this enduring vegetable. This scientific approach adds another layer of understanding, connecting us directly to the agricultural practices of an ancient civilization. So, when you consider the onion's place in ancient Egypt, remember it's not just a story passed down through texts. It's a story told by the very earth itself, by the remnants found in sacred tombs, and by the vivid brushstrokes of ancient artists. The next time you're peeling an onion, perhaps a small fragment of its ancient ancestor is present in its very genes, a living link to a civilization that truly revered this tear-inducing marvel. Having explored the onion's unique role in ancient Egypt, it's natural to wonder how their system of taxation by vegetable compared to other great civilizations of antiquity. Was Egypt an outlier in its reliance on in-kind payments, or was the onion a truly peculiar exception? As you cast your gaze across the ancient world, you'll find that while methods varied, the underlying principle of collecting resources for the state was universal, even if the specifics could be truly fascinating. Imagine being a citizen in ancient Mesopotamia, perhaps living in the bustling city-states of Sumer or Akkad. Here, taxes were often collected in grain, much like in Egypt, as it was the primary agricultural product and the basis of the economy. However, you might also be expected to contribute labor to state projects, or provide a portion of your livestock or textiles. So, while onions weren't typically the direct currency of taxation, other forms of produce certainly were. It was less about specific vegetables and more about the fundamental output of the land. One mainstream historical fact is that many ancient economies, particularly before the widespread adoption of coinage, relied heavily on in-kind taxation. Empires like the Hittites, the Assyrians, and even early Rome demanded tribute and taxes in the form of agricultural produce, raw materials, or labor. This system made sense in a world where trade was often localized and standardized currency was rare or non-existent. It simply meant collecting what was abundant and useful. Now for a quirky tidbit. The Inca Empire in the Andes, thousands of years later and a world away, had an incredibly sophisticated system of taxation known as MITA. This wasn't about paying in goods at all, but entirely about labor service. You, as an Inca citizen, would contribute a certain amount of your time to state projects, whether building roads, working in mines, or serving in the army. While you wouldn't be paying taxes in onions, you might be helping to grow them for state-run storehouses. Imagine a system where your tax return was simply a record of how many days you contributed your physical effort. Historians still argue whether the Inca MITA system was a purely coercive labor tax, or if it also carried elements of community obligation and reciprocal support. Even in ancient Greece and Rome, where coinage eventually became prevalent, taxes in kind were not entirely abandoned, especially in earlier periods or in conquered provinces. You might find that regions specialized in olive oil or wine would pay a portion of their harvest to the ruling power. It was a pragmatic approach, adapting to local resources. So, while the prominence of the onion as a specific tax item might seem uniquely Egyptian, the underlying principle of collecting valuable, tangible resources from the land was a shared characteristic of many ancient civilizations. Perhaps the Egyptian system was just a little more aromatic than most. Having explored the grand systems of the pharaohs and the broader ancient world, let's zoom in and truly immerse ourselves in the everyday reality of the individual who made it all possible, the humble ancient Egyptian farmer. This was your life, dictated by the sun, the Nile, and the persistent rhythm of growth and harvest. It wasn't glorious, but it was essential, and it deeply intertwined with the story of our tear-inducing friend, the onion. Imagine waking before dawn, not to the blare of an alarm clock, but to the soft chirping of birds and the first faint light painting the eastern sky. Your home is likely a simple mud brick dwelling, cool in the morning but soon to be baking under the relentless sun. After a quick meal of bread, and perhaps some leftover stew from yesterday, heavily flavored with garlic and, of course, onions, you'd grab your tools, a simple wooden plow, maybe a hand hoe, and head out to the fields. The air would already be warming, carrying the scent of rich earth and the distant murmur of activity from neighboring farms. One mainstream historical fact is that the vast majority of the ancient Egyptian population were agricultural laborers or farmers, living a life deeply connected to the land and the annual cycles of the Nile. Their daily routines were dictated by the seasons of inundation, planting, and harvest, forming the bedrock of the entire civilization's economy and social structure. Your very existence was a testament to the power of the land. Now for a quirky tidbit. Despite the simplicity of their tools, Egyptian farmers were remarkably skilled at maximizing their yield. They practiced crop rotation, understood the importance of fallow periods, and even used rudimentary fertilizers like ash and manure. Imagine you, painstakingly spreading animal dung over your onion patch, knowing that this unpleasant task would lead to a more bountiful harvest and, crucially, a better chance of meeting the pharaoh's tax demands. It's a reminder that sophisticated agricultural knowledge isn't a modern invention. Historians still argue whether the level of agricultural innovation was primarily driven by necessity or by a systematic accumulation of knowledge passed down through generations. Your day would be long and arduous. You'd spend hours tilling the soil, sowing seeds, and, crucially for our story, carefully tending to your growing onion shoots. You'd meticulously weed, ensuring no competitors stole precious nutrients, and irrigate, guiding the life-giving water from canals to your thirsty plants. The sun would beat down, sweat would prickle your skin, and the dust would cling to everything. Lunch might be a quick break in the shade of a date palm, more bread, more vegetables, perhaps a refreshing gulp of beer. As evening approached, you'd gather your tools, your muscles aching, and head back home. The simple pleasures of family, a basic meal, and the cool evening air would be your reward. It was a life of ceaseless labor, but also one of deep connection to the land and a profound understanding of the natural world. Every single onion you harvested represented not just food, but sweat, effort, and a direct contribution to the magnificent, enduring civilization you called home. The seemingly simple act of ancient Egyptians paying taxes in onions had far-reaching economic ripple effects throughout their entire society. It wasn't just a quirky historical tidbit, it was a fundamental cog in a highly centralized economy, influencing everything from trade to resource allocation. This perishable form of payment, seemingly fragile, actually underpinned the stability of an empire. Imagine a vast, intricate web with the pharaoh at its center. Every harvest, every taxed onion, was a thread connecting the individual farmer to this central authority. When you surrendered a portion of your onion crop, you weren't just giving up food, you were contributing to a national larder. This collective pool of resources, managed by the state, then became the engine for all public works. Think of the logistics. If the state needed to feed thousands of stonecutters building a new temple in Luxor, those onions and other staples had to be transported, stored, and distributed efficiently. This necessitated roads, river transport via boats, and a vast network of administrators. One mainstream historical fact is that the redistribution economy of ancient Egypt, fueled by in-kind taxes, allowed for the financing of monumental projects like pyramids, temples, and irrigation systems without a complex monetary system. The state effectively acted as a massive central bank and distributor, collecting resources and then deploying them where needed. This capacity for centralized resource management was a key factor in Egypt's enduring power and stability for millennia. Now for a quirky tidbit. The perishable nature of onions and other produce meant that storage was a constant concern. This likely encouraged prompt redistribution. If you've got tons of onions, you can't just hoard them indefinitely. You need to use them, trade them, or distribute them before they spoil. This natural time limit on certain goods might have actually encouraged a more dynamic flow of resources within the state system, preventing stagnation. Imagine the pressure on the ancient Egyptian logistics managers, constantly moving commodities before they went bad, like a very large, slow-moving game of edible hot potato. Historians still argue about the exact percentage of spoilage rates for various crops within the state's storage system. The economic ripple effect also extended to specialization. Because the state handled the large-scale collection and distribution of staple foods, individual communities and regions could afford to specialize in other crafts or goods, knowing that their basic food needs would be met by the central government. A potter could focus on making exquisite pottery, or a weaver on fine linen, relying on the state's grain and onion provisions. This division of labor, facilitated by the tax system, fostered a more diverse and robust economy, allowing different regions to contribute their unique skills and products to the national wealth. The humble onion, therefore, was not just food. It was a silent facilitator of ancient Egyptian economic complexity, a little bulb with a surprisingly huge impact. After millennia of being a cornerstone of diets, medicine, and even tax systems, how does the humble onion fare in our modern world? Its ancient reverence certainly contrasts sharply with its everyday status now. Today, you might simply grab a bag of them from a supermarket shelf, hardly giving a second thought to their profound historical journey. Yet, in some ways, the onion continues to hold a subtle, if often unacknowledged, power in our lives. Imagine walking into any grocery store today, anywhere in the world. What's one item you are almost guaranteed to find, regardless of cuisine or culture? The onion. It's a global staple, a flavor enhancer, and a foundational ingredient in countless dishes, from French onion soup to Indian curries, Mexican salsas, and virtually every stir-fry you can imagine. We rarely see it as a symbol of purity or eternal life, or as a direct form of currency. Instead, it's simply a culinary workhorse, reliably adding depth and zest to our meals, sometimes bringing a tear to our eye in the process, but rarely inspiring philosophical contemplation. One mainstream historical fact is that onions are one of the oldest cultivated vegetables in human history, with evidence of their use dating back over 7,000 years. Their resilience, ease of growth, and long shelf life, for a vegetable anyway, contributed to their widespread adoption across different civilizations and continents, making them a true global citizen of the plant world. They are a testament to enduring agricultural success. Now for a quirky tidbit. While we no longer offer them to gods, some cultures still attribute specific health benefits to onions, much like the ancient Egyptians. Grandmothers worldwide might still recommend onion poultices for colds or coughs, and modern scientific studies continue to explore their antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. So, in a strange echo of antiquity, the onion still holds a place in our collective, informal medical cabinet. Imagine your own grandma, perhaps without knowing it, channeling a little bit of ancient Egyptian herbal wisdom every time she suggests an onion-based remedy. Historians still argue about the extent to which traditional folk medicine from ancient times directly influenced later practices in different cultures. The modern perception of the onion is one of utility and versatility. We appreciate its ability to transform a dish, to add pungency or sweetness depending on how it's prepared. We might complain about the tears it causes or the lingering smell on our hands, but we rarely question its fundamental place in our kitchens. It has transitioned from a revered, multi-purpose resource to a reliable, undervalued culinary staple, available for mere pennies a pound. The idea of using it to pay your taxes today seems utterly absurd, a quaint notion from a bygone era, yet it speaks volumes about the very different economic and cultural landscapes of ancient Egypt and our present time. The onion's journey, from a symbol of pharaonic power to a universal kitchen essential, is a quiet testament to its enduring power. As we gently drift towards the end of our journey through ancient Egypt, it's worth reflecting on the remarkable legacy of the onion. It's more than just a historical curiosity or a culinary ingredient. It's a silent, enduring testament to the ingenuity, adaptability, and even the simple elegance of ancient civilizations. This unassuming bulb, which once brought tears to the eyes of both farmers and pharaohs, continues to connect us to a distant past in unexpected ways. Imagine for a moment how many generations of human hands have cultivated this same plant. From the very first wild onion foragers to the meticulous farmers along the Nile, to the vast agricultural operations of today, the onion has been a constant companion. It speaks to a fundamental human need for sustenance, but also to a deeper connection with the earth and its bounty. Its very existence, thriving for millennia, reminds us of the power of simple, natural resources to shape complex societies. One mainstream historical fact is that the domestication and widespread cultivation of plants like the onion were foundational to the development of settled human societies and the rise of agriculture. enabling populations to grow and specialize beyond subsistence living. Without such reliable food sources, the complex social structures and monumental achievements of civilizations like Egypt would simply not have been possible. The onion, in its quiet way, was a building block of civilization itself. Now for a quirky tidbit. Some modern chefs and food historians are exploring ancient recipes, attempting to recreate dishes using ingredients and methods historically available. Imagine trying to make a truly authentic ancient Egyptian stew and realizing just how central the onion, alongside other basic vegetables, would have been to its flavor profile. It's a delicious way to connect with the past, one bite at a time. Historians still argue about the precise flavors and textures of ancient Egyptian cuisine, given the lack of detailed recipes and variations in cultivation methods. The legacy of the onion also lies in what it represents about resourcefulness. In a world without money as we know it, where trade was often barter and infrastructure was rudimentary, ancient Egyptians found ways to manage vast resources using what was available. The onion, abundant and nutritious, fit perfectly into this system. It highlights a pragmatic approach to governance and economics, demonstrating how necessity truly is the mother of invention, even when that invention is simply using a vegetable as currency. So, as you prepare to close your eyes, take a moment to appreciate the humble onion. It's more than just a source of tears in the kitchen. It's a living link to a world where it helped build empires, nourish populations, and even guide souls to the afterlife. Its layered history is as rich and complex as its own structure, a quiet testament to its enduring power and influence throughout human civilization. Now, as the ancient sun dips below the horizon of your mind's eye, casting long, peaceful shadows over the Nile, allow the gentle hum of our story to fade into the quietude of the night. The work of the ancient Egyptian farmer is done. The scribes have put away their papyrus, and the granaries are full, holding the promise of tomorrow. Let the soft whispers of history lull you, as the river flows timelessly onward, carrying secrets and solace in its currents. There's no need to cling to every detail now. Simply let the vastness of time and the quiet rhythm of the past wash over you, like a soothing wave. Your journey through ancient Egypt has come to a peaceful close. Rest now, truly and deeply. End of script. Sweet dreams.